Alvin Cross stood motionless before the towering gates of the Claraxian royal chamber. The structure loomed like a living monument, its surface pulsating faintly with bioelectric energy. Intricate symbols carved into its translucent panels glowed and shifted, forming patterns that seemed to rewrite themselves as if responding to his presence. Alvin exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to relax. He knew that within moments, he would cross into the heart of the Claraxian Empire, a place no human had entered before without trembling. Yet here he stood, steady, defiant. The gates opened with a low, resonating hum, the energy within them spilling into the air like a tangible force. A deep blue light illuminated the pathway before him, leading into a chamber so vast that Alvin's eyes struggled to comprehend its scale. The walls, made of a crystalline material that seemed to ripple like water, glowed faintly with hues of azure and violet. Above, a dome of swirling lights mimicked the galaxy itself, with stars and nebulae in motion, as if the cosmos had folded into this sacred space. At the far end of the chamber sat the Claraxian queen, her throne carved from what appeared to be a massive opalescent stone, its edges shimmering as though alive. She was impossible to miss, an imposing figure with deep blue skin that radiated a faint, almost imperceptible glow. Her presence dominated the room, her form draped in flowing robes that rippled like liquid starlight. And, of course, her face was obscured by the mask, an artifact that had become as much a part of her identity as her title. The mask, made from a radiant, ever-shifting alloy, obscured her true visage entirely. Its surface glimmered with patterns of moving light, hinting at a complexity beneath that no one had dared to uncover. Alvin had heard the stories, legends that her unmasked face could drive beings mad or blind them with its raw, incomprehensible beauty. But he didn't believe in legends. He believed in action. He stepped forward, each step echoing loudly in the cavernous space. Around the perimeter of the chamber, Claraxian nobles floated in hovering chairs, their translucent forms glowing faintly. Their sharp, angular faces twisted in surprise as they watched the human approach the queen. The guards, tall figures with sinewy bodies and armor made of the same shimmering alloy as her mask, tightened their grips on their long, spear-like weapons. One of the guards moved to block his path. "Halt, human," the guard said, his voice a low, resonant hum that Alvin felt in his chest. "You stand too close to the sanctum. No one approaches the sovereign unbidden." Alvin raised his chin, meeting the guard's glowing eyes. "I come with respect," he said, his voice clear and firm. "But I cannot deliver my message from across the room. If we are to find peace between our worlds, we must do so face to face." The nobles gasped audibly, their whispers rising like a swarm of insects. The guard's grip on his weapon tightened. "You presume too much," he growled. Before the guard could strike, the queen raised her hand. The gesture was subtle, but the effect was immediate. The guard froze, his weapon lowering as though an invisible force had taken hold. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the energy flowing through the chamber. "You speak with boldness, human," the queen said, her voice melodic yet commanding. It echoed across the hall, carrying layers of harmonics that seemed to bypass hearing and resonate directly within the soul. "Few have dared to address me so directly. Fewer still have survived their arrogance." Alvin stopped a few paces from the base of her throne. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect, but not submission. "Your Eminence," he began, his voice steady, "our worlds stand on the brink of conflict. Misunderstandings have bred mistrust, and mistrust has brought us to the edge of war. I believe we can find another path, but not if we continue to hide behind masks and formalities." The queen tilted her head slightly, the light on her mask shifting to form what might have been a faint smile, or something entirely alien. "You speak of masks as though they are merely physical," she said. "But you are naive if you think removing them will solve what lies between us. What you ask is not a small thing. Do you understand the danger of what you seek?" "I understand the risk," Alvin replied, though his heart pounded in his chest. But I also know that true understanding requires vulnerability. I am willing to face that danger if it means forging a bond between our species. The queen descended the steps of her throne with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Her robes flowed around her like water, and the air around her seemed to shimmer as though bending to her will. She stopped just before him, her towering presence forcing him to look up to meet her gaze, or what he imagined was her gaze behind the mask. "You speak of bonds," she said softly, her voice now almost a whisper. "Yet you know nothing of what you ask. My mask does not hide me for my sake, but for yours. To see what lies beneath is to invite madness, to unravel the fabric of your being. Still, you stand here, asking to cross a line no one has dared." Alvin swallowed hard, but refused to waver. "I stand here because someone must. If our species are to share this galaxy, we cannot do so from behind walls of fear and tradition. I don't fear what lies beneath your mask, your eminence. I fear what will happen if we never look past it." The queen regarded him in silence. The room seemed to hold its breath, the nobles staring in stunned disbelief. Finally, she raised her hand and placed it lightly on his chest. The contact sent a wave of energy surging through him, not painful, but overwhelming, as if the universe itself had opened a door within him. The room erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage, and the guards moved to intervene, but the queen turned her head slightly, silencing them with a glance. "Enough," she said, her voice sharp and commanding. "This human has come with sincerity. He will not be harmed." She stepped back, her hand lingering for a moment before falling to her side. "You have my attention, Alvin Cross. But understand this. You tread a dangerous path. Prepare yourself, for tomorrow, you will see the beginning of what you seek. Whether you survive it is another matter entirely." As the gates closed behind him, Alvin felt the enormity of what he had done settle heavily on his shoulders. He had defied every protocol, challenged an ancient tradition, and somehow walked away alive. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. What awaited him tomorrow could change everything or destroy him completely. Alvin Cross sat cross-legged on the smooth, translucent surface of his quarters. The room pulsed faintly with the signature bioluminescent glow that seemed intrinsic to every Cloraxian structure, a rhythmic beat that mimicked the steady hum of a living organism. He closed his eyes, trying to steady his thoughts, but the events of the previous day replayed relentlessly in his mind. The queen's commanding presence, her cryptic warnings, and the electric charge of her touch that seemed to resonate in his chest even now. He opened his eyes to the alien light. This wasn't just diplomacy. It was survival. The human colonies, though resilient, couldn't stand against Cloraxian technology in open conflict. Peace wasn't just preferable. It was the only way to avoid extinction. That knowledge weighed on him like an anchor, keeping him grounded, even as the enormity of his task threatened to overwhelm him. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door to his chamber slid open without a sound, revealing a Cloraxian attendant. Its tall, willowy frame shimmered faintly in the dim light, translucent skin revealing glowing energy coursing through its veins. "The sovereign awaits," the attendant said, its voice calm and steady, devoid of emotion. Alvin stood, nodding without a word. He followed the figure through the maze-like corridors of the citadel. The walls around him curved and shimmered, their surfaces smooth and seamless, as though grown rather than constructed. The air carried a faint metallic tang, a reminder of the alien energy coursing through the building. The attendant stopped before a door unlike any other Alvin had seen. It was circular and opaque, its surface rippling like a pool of liquid mercury. Without hesitation, the attendant gestured for Alvin to step forward. "Enter," it said, before disappearing into the shadows. The door parted like water, and Alvin stepped through. The room beyond was vast, yet intimate, a strange paradox that seemed to define everything about the Cloraxian queen. The ceiling arched high above him, made of a translucent material that allowed a view of the cosmos beyond. Stars blinked and shimmered in the distance, their light casting soft patterns on the chamber floor. The floor itself was a shallow pool of clear, warm liquid that rippled with each of Alvin's steps. At the center of the pool stood the queen, her back turned to him. Her deep blue skin seemed to absorb and radiate the starlight simultaneously, and her flowing robes moved as if caught in an unseen current. "You came," she said without turning, her voice softer than before, but no less resonant. "You summoned me," Alvin replied, stopping a respectful distance from her. The queen turned to face him, her mask catching the light and shifting in mesmerizing patterns. It was a thing of both beauty and power, a veil that obscured her true form while amplifying her presence. "You stand before me, knowing the risks," she said. "Few beings have the audacity, let alone the endurance, to do so." "Why?" Alvin met her gaze, or what he imagined was her gaze behind the mask. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "If we don't take risks, we'll remain trapped in the same cycles of fear and mistrust. We need something more, something real." The queen studied him, the silence stretching until it became almost unbearable. Then, with a graceful motion, she extended her hand toward him. "Step closer," she commanded. Alvin hesitated, not out of fear, but out of an instinctive sense that crossing that final distance would change everything. Still, he obeyed, stepping forward until he was mere inches from her. The queen placed her hand lightly on his forehead. Her touch was warm, but carried an intensity that made the air around them seem to vibrate. "Then let me show you what lies beyond," she said. The world around him dissolved. Alvin felt himself falling, though there was no ground to catch him, no wind to push against his body. He floated in a void, a swirling expanse of light and shadow where time and space ceased to exist. Voices filled the void, not spoken words but emotions, grief, longing, fury, hope. They washed over him in waves, each one more powerful than the last. He saw flashes of alien worlds, some thriving with vibrant life, others reduced to barren wastelands. He witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. And then he saw her. The queen stood in the center of the maelstrom, her mask removed. Her true form was indescribable, a shifting tapestry of light and energy that defied logic. Her face, if it could be called a face, was both terrifying and beautiful, a fusion of patterns that seemed to tell a story older than time itself. "This is what I carry," her voice echoed, not in his ears but in his mind. "The memories of my people, the weight of their hopes, their failures. To bear this alone is to endure an existence few could comprehend. To share it is to risk annihilation." Alvin felt his mind bending under the strain of it all. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he might shatter under the sheer magnitude of what he was experiencing. But then, something within him pushed back, a spark of defiance, of resilience. "I'm still here," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "I'm not going anywhere." The queen's form flickered, and the chaos around them began to recede. The void collapsed into itself, and Alvin found himself back in the chamber, gasping for breath. The pool beneath him shimmered faintly, reflecting the cosmos above. The queen stood before him, her mask once again in place. "You are stronger than I anticipated," she said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been admiration. "But strength alone will not be enough. What lies ahead will test every part of you, mind, body, and soul." Alvin straightened, his legs unsteady but his resolve firm. "Then I'll face it," he said. "Whatever it takes." The queen nodded. "Return to your quarters. Rest. Tomorrow, your true trial begins." As Alvin turned to leave, he couldn't shake the lingering sensation of her touch or the weight of the vision she had shared. He knew he had crossed a threshold, one from which there was no turning back. The journey ahead would demand more than he had ever given, but he was ready. He had to be, for humanity, for peace, and for the bond he now shared with the enigmatic queen. Alvin Cross entered the chamber with hesitant steps, the door sealing shut behind him like a ripple through liquid glass. The air hummed, thick and alive with energy, as though the room itself anticipated his presence. The celestial expanse above him glowed brighter tonight, the swirling stars casting radiant light across the shallow pool that formed the chamber's floor. The liquid reflected the stars in an otherworldly shimmer, rippling softly as he approached. At the center of the chamber stood the queen, her deep blue skin glowing faintly in the starlight. Her robes, a cascade of flowing fabric that seemed alive, moved gently around her, as though caught in an invisible current. Tonight she was unmasked. Alvin found himself staring at her true face, not a fixed form, but a dynamic tapestry of light and shadow, her features shifting and reforming in patterns that defied human comprehension. It was both mesmerizing and unsettling, a beauty so alien it felt untouchable. "You return," she said, her voice melodic yet edged with something sharper tonight. A challenge, perhaps. "You summon me," Alvin replied, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened under her gaze. "Good," she said, stepping forward. Her movements were fluid, each step causing the liquid floor to ripple outward. "Tonight, we take another step. You have seen fragments of what I carry. Now you will feel it." Alvin frowned, uncertain. "Feel it?" The queen tilted her head, her shifting features forming something that might have been a smile, or perhaps something entirely different. "Words can only take us so far, human. Understanding requires more. It requires trust, vulnerability, and connection." She extended her hand toward him, her long fingers elegant and glowing faintly. "Take my hand." Alvin hesitated. He had already seen the weight of her memories, the overwhelming chaos of lives and civilizations compressed into a single moment. The idea of experiencing more, of feeling it, made his chest tighten. But he stepped forward, reaching out. His hand met hers, and the moment their palms connected, the chamber erupted in light. The stars above descended, their orbs of light circling the pair in an intricate dance. The liquid beneath their feet pulsed and shifted, reacting to their presence. Alvin felt a warmth surge through his body from the point of contact, spreading outward until it enveloped him entirely. "Do not fight it," the queen said, her voice softer now. "Let it guide you." He realized she wasn't just holding his hand, she was guiding him. With a gentle pull, she led him into motion. Her movements were precise, almost hypnotic, as though she had done this dance countless times before. Alvin struggled to follow at first, his steps clumsy and out of sync, the liquid beneath him splashing in protest. "Stop thinking," she said sharply, her tone cutting through his hesitation. "Feel." Alvin closed his eyes, focusing on the warmth of her touch and the rhythm of the chamber. The hum of the air grew louder, syncing with the beating of his heart. When he moved again, it was instinctive, his steps aligning with hers in a way that felt natural, even inevitable. The stars responded to their movements, their light growing brighter and forming patterns in the air. Alvin realized the patterns weren't random. They were a form of communication. Each step, each turn, shaped the light into symbols he didn't understand but could somehow feel. "What are we saying?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The queen's reply was almost a sigh. "We are speaking truths you cannot yet comprehend. But listen, and you will begin to hear." As they moved, Alvin felt something shift. The warmth of her hand deepened, turning into a pulse that resonated through his entire body. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, almost spiritual. He could feel her in a way he hadn't before. Her strength, her sorrow, her relentless burden. "You've carried this alone," he said, his voice trembling with the realization. The queen's steps faltered for the briefest moment. "Do not presume to understand me," she said, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. "I'm not presuming," Alvin said, his movements steadying even as his voice wavered. "I can feel it, all of it. You've carried this for so long, and it's crushing you." The chamber seemed to react to his words. The stars dimmed, the liquid beneath them stilled, and the hum in the air softened. The queen stopped moving, her gaze fixed on him. "You feel what I allow you to feel," she said, her voice quieter now. "Nothing more." But Alvin could see the truth in her shifting features, in the way her glowing skin dimmed slightly, as though his words had touched a nerve. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "You don't have to keep everyone at a distance." For a moment, the queen said nothing. Then, with deliberate slowness, she stepped closer, closing the gap between them until they were inches apart. Her free hand rose, brushing lightly against his temple. The touch was feather-light, but sent a surge of warmth through him, as though her energy was wrapping around his very essence. "You speak as though you understand," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But understanding comes at a cost." Before Alvin could respond, the chamber shifted again. The stars above swirled violently, their light growing blinding. The liquid beneath them rippled like a stormy sea, and the hum in the air turned into a roar. "Do not let go," the queen said, her hand tightening around his. The chaos around them intensified, the stars descending like burning meteors, their light searing into Alvin's vision. He closed his eyes, clinging to her hand as the storm raged. The warmth of her touch anchored him, keeping him steady even as the world seemed to collapse. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The stars returned to their places above, the liquid beneath them stilled, and the air grew calm. Alvin opened his eyes to find the queen standing before him, her face unreadable, but her grip on his hand still firm. "You did not let go," she said, a note of approval in her voice. "I said I wouldn't," Alvin replied, his breath ragged. The queen released his hand, stepping back. "You have proven yourself stronger than most. But strength alone will not be enough. You must prepare for what comes next." As Alvin left the chamber, the warmth of her touch still lingered, a reminder of the bond they had begun to form. He didn't fully understand what had happened, but he knew one thing for certain. The queen had let him in, if only for a moment. And that moment had changed everything. The citadel was unervingly quiet as Alvin Cross followed the Claraxian attendant through the dimly lit halls. The shimmering walls that usually pulsed with energy were subdued, their glow faint and cold. The silence unnerved him more than the endless stares of the Claraxian nobles who had watched him with distrust since his arrival. He'd spent the night in restless contemplation, replaying the strange, intimate dance he'd shared with the queen. Her touch had been more than physical. It had been a doorway, a glimpse into the vast, incomprehensible weight she bore. He couldn't shake the memory of her hand tightening on his, or the vulnerability he had felt bleeding through her otherwise unshakable demeanor. The attendant stopped before a pair of towering doors, their smooth surface etched with shifting, luminous patterns. "Enter," it said simply, before vanishing back into the shadows. Alvin squared his shoulders and stepped forward. The doors opened soundlessly, revealing a smaller chamber than he had expected. The space felt intimate, almost claustrophobic compared to the expansive halls of the citadel. The walls, translucent and alive with faint currents of light, seemed to pulse in sync with his own heartbeat. At the center stood the queen, her figure framed by the soft glow of the chamber. She was unmasked, her face, that shifting mosaic of light and energy, pulsed faintly, its patterns moving slower than before. She didn't turn to acknowledge him, her focus seemingly fixed on the small, crystalline structure before her. "You called for me," Alvin said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. The queen turned, her expression unreadable. "You have proven resilient, Alvin Cross. Few would have endured what you have." "Resilience is all I have," he replied. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You possess something far more dangerous, a mind unbroken by fear. That is why you are here." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. "What happens now?" The queen raised a hand, and the crystalline structure before her began to hum. Its surface shimmered, refracting light into the air around them. Alvin realized it wasn't just an object. It was alive, pulsing with energy, like the chamber itself. "What you seek is trust," she said. "What you will find is truth." The hum grew louder, resonating in his chest. The walls of the chamber darkened, and the currents of light within them slowed to a halt. The air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. "You have asked for vulnerability," the queen continued, her voice softer now. "You have demanded connection. But do you understand what that means? I think so, Alvin said cautiously. Then you are mistaken, she replied, her tone sharper now. Before he could respond, the queen reached out and placed her hand on his chest. It wasn't a gentle touch this time. It was firm, unyielding, and impossibly warm. Alvin felt the energy surge through him, not like the soft ripples of the dance, but a torrential wave crashing through his very being. The room dissolved. Alvin stood in a void, vast and endless. It wasn't darkness, but an expanse of blinding light that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. He wasn't alone. The queen stood before him, her true form fully revealed. She was no longer constrained by robes or humanoid symmetry. She was a being of light and motion, her presence overwhelming and incomprehensible. "This is what I am," she said, her voice echoing through the void. "Not the sovereign you see, not the figure who wears the mask. I am the sum of my people, the weight of our past, and the custodian of our future." The void shifted, and Alvin saw flashes of her memories. He saw a world vibrant with life, the Claraxian homeworld before its fall. He saw the rise of their empire, their technological and cultural brilliance. But he also saw the devastation, a war that had scarred them deeply, a loss so profound it had left their species fractured and dependent on her strength. "I am their memory," she said. "Their pain, their hope, their fear. To lead is to carry this burden, to wear the mask that shields them from what they cannot endure." The images shifted again, faster this time. He saw her alone in the citadel, centuries passing as she bore the unrelenting weight of her people's legacy. He saw her grieving, struggling, yet standing firm because she had no choice. "Why show me this?" Alvin asked, his voice trembling under the weight of what he was seeing. "Because you must understand," she said, stepping closer. "You seek connection, but you do not yet grasp the cost. To truly know me, to see me as I am, is to risk yourself." The light around them dimmed, and the void shifted again. Alvin felt his own memories being drawn forth. His childhood on the fringes of human space, the loss of his family to conflict, the endless struggle to prove himself in a galaxy that saw humanity as fragile and reckless. "You are stronger than most," the queen said. "But strength alone will not protect you from this." She reached out again, her light intertwining with his. The touch was different this time, gentler but no less intense. It wasn't just energy. It was emotion, raw and unfiltered. He felt her sorrow, her longing, her isolation. But he also felt her resolve, her unyielding commitment to her people. "You're not as untouchable as you want them to think," Alvin said softly. Her light pulsed faintly, as though she were laughing. "No leader is. We all wear masks." Alvin cross. "Even you?" The void collapsed, and Alvin found himself back in the chamber. His legs buckled, and he fell to his knees, gasping for air. The queen stood over him, her expression unreadable once more. "You have seen me as no other has," she said. "You have touched what lies beneath the mask. Few survive such an experience." Alvin looked up at her, his chest still heaving. "Why me?" "Because you dared to ask," she replied simply. She extended a hand, helping him to his feet. Her touch was warm, steadying. "You are not broken," she said, her tone carrying a hint of admiration. "But you are changed. Remember that as you continue." Alvin nodded, his mind still reeling from what he had experienced. As the queen turned and left the chamber, he realized that the bond they had begun to forge was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just a bridge between their worlds. It was something deeper, something unspoken, and it terrified him. The air in the chamber seemed heavier than before, thick with a tension that pressed against Alvin Cross's skin like a physical weight. The space was darker than the others he had encountered in the Citadel, its walls a deep, pulsating indigo that mirrored a steady heartbeat. A faint, golden light emanated from the ceiling, illuminating the figure at the center of the room, the Claraxian queen. She stood with her back to him, her robes cascading around her like liquid starlight. The rippling glow of her deep blue skin was more subdued than usual, almost dim, and her shoulders were tense. Alvin paused at the threshold, reluctant to interrupt her solitude. "You hesitate," she said without turning, her voice softer than usual, but no less commanding. "You seem different," Alvin replied, his voice steady but curious. He stepped forward, his boots clicking softly against the smooth, glass-like floor. The queen turned to face him, her mask absent. Her true face shimmered with shifting patterns of light and shadow, a living tapestry that seemed to convey emotions beyond human comprehension. Her features were more focused than before, less fluid, and Alvin thought he caught something in her: hesitation, or perhaps vulnerability. "This chamber is sacred," she said, her gaze fixed on him. "It is where the bond of leadership is forged, where the burdens of the past and future converge. I have never brought another here." Alvin stopped a few paces away from her, his brow furrowing. "Why bring me now?" The queen stepped closer, her luminous presence filling his vision. "Because you seek to bridge the distance between us, Alvin Cross. You demand connection, trust, understanding. But you do not yet comprehend the cost." Her words hung in the air like a warning. Alvin clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "I've come this far. Show me what's next." The queen's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though her shifting patterns betrayed an undercurrent of sadness. "Very well," she said, "but understand this. What lies ahead cannot be undone. You will no longer be yourself, nor will I. Are you prepared for that?" Alvin nodded without hesitation. "If it means understanding you, understanding us, then I'm ready." She raised her hand, and the room responded. The golden light overhead grew brighter, the walls trembling with an energy that seemed to awaken from a long slumber. The air around them vibrated, and the floor beneath Alvin's feet pulsed faintly, as if alive. "Step closer," she said. Alvin obeyed, closing the gap between them until they were inches apart. The queen lifted both hands, placing them lightly against his temples. Her touch was warm, but the energy coursing through her fingers was intense, almost overwhelming. "What happens now?" Alvin asked, his voice quieter, almost reverent. "Now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we become." The world around him dissolved. Alvin felt himself falling, though there was no wind, no gravity, no sense of direction. He wasn't in the chamber anymore, but a boundless void filled with light and sound. The air, or what felt like air, was thick with whispers, fragments of voices he couldn't fully understand. He saw the queen's memories flood into him. He stood on a world bathed in perpetual twilight, its skies painted with endless auroras. He felt the joy of her people as they thrived in harmony, their unity as natural as breathing. But then the images shifted. He saw the betrayal that fractured them, the civil war that tore their world apart. He felt her anguish as the leaders who had once stood beside her turned their backs, leaving her to bear the weight of survival alone. Her voice echoed in his mind. "This is what I have carried. Every triumph, every failure, every choice." The visions continued, faster now. He saw her standing alone in the citadel, centuries passing in solitude as she held her people together through sheer will. He felt the depth of her loneliness, a hollow ache that no amount of strength could fill. And yet, through it all, he felt her determination, her refusal to let her people's legacy fade into obscurity. Alvin's own memories surfaced in response. He saw himself as a child, standing in the wreckage of a human colony destroyed by war. He felt the bitterness of loss, the desperation to survive, the resolve to prove that humanity was more than fragile flesh. He felt the pain of failure and the quiet triumph of perseverance, the need to forge a future where peace wasn't just a dream. The connection between them deepened, the boundaries of their minds blurring. Alvin no longer knew where her memories ended and his began. Her emotions, grief, hope, fear, love, became his own, and his thoughts spilled into her like a rushing tide. "You are stronger than I imagined," she said, her voice resonating in the void. "So are you," Alvin replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. "You've carried this alone for too long. You don't have to anymore." The light around them grew blinding, and the whispers in the air became a deafening roar. Alvin felt the connection between them solidify, a bond unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't just understanding, it was unity. They were no longer two separate beings, but something greater, something shared. When Alvin opened his eyes, he was back in the chamber. His knees buckled, and he fell to the floor, gasping for breath. The queen stood over him, her luminous form steady and bright. "You did not break," she said, her voice carrying a note of quiet awe. Alvin looked up at her, his chest still heaving. "I said I wouldn't," he replied, his voice hoarse but resolute. The queen extended a hand, helping him to his feet. Her touch was steadier now, more grounded, as though the bond they had forged had anchored her in a way she hadn't expected. "You are no longer just a man, Alvin Cross," she said, her patterns shifting into something softer, almost gentle. "You are part of me, as I am part of you. Together, we will face what lies ahead." Alvin met her gaze, his own thoughts steadier now. "Then let's not waste any time." The queen's lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time, Alvin thought he saw a flicker of hope in her ever-shifting light. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not as ruler and subject, but as equals, bound by a connection that transcended words. And for the first time in his life, Alvin felt truly whole. The golden light of the Citadel's corridors seemed dimmer as Alvin Cross made his way back to the chamber where his belongings were kept. The bond he had formed with the queen only hours earlier weighed on him, not as a burden, but as a profound shift in his understanding of himself and the universe. He had glimpsed her innermost thoughts, her memories, and the core of her being. In doing so, he had become something more, part human, part vessel for the unity they had forged. But even as he walked, Alvin felt the stirrings of unease. His steps echoed through the quiet halls, and he noticed the subtle movements of the Citadel's attendants, their translucent forms casting faint shadows in the bioluminescent glow. They watched him now, their gazes sharper, less curious and more wary. The feeling of isolation gnawed at him. He had been accepted by the queen, but the rest of the Claraxians were not so quick to follow. When he reached his quarters, he found a figure waiting for him, one he hadn't seen before. The Claraxian noble stood tall, his angular features sharper than most, his translucent skin glowing faintly with hues of deep orange and green. His robes, adorned with intricate patterns of shifting light, signified his high rank. The air around him felt charged, almost hostile. "You have gone too far, human," the noble said, his voice resonating with a low hum that carried authority and disdain. Alvin stopped in the doorway, his instincts urging caution. "I wasn't aware there were limits to trying to understand one another." The noble's expression darkened, the light within him dimming slightly. "You have violated the sacred balance. The queen is not meant to bond with outsiders. What you have done is unnatural, and it will have consequences." Alvin straightened, meeting the noble's gaze. "What's unnatural is clinging to fear when the galaxy is at stake. The queen understands that. Perhaps it's time you did too." The noble stepped forward, his voice growing colder. "You presume to lecture me about understanding? You are a fleeting creature, your kind barely emerging from the chaos of your own making. You have no place here." Before Alvin could respond, a new voice echoed through the corridor. "That is enough." The queen's presence filled the space before she even stepped into view. Her glowing form emerged from the shadows, her light brighter than ever, her expression unreadable. The noble bowed slightly, but did not retreat. "Your Eminence, this human's actions were done under my guidance," the queen interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "He has succeeded where others have failed. Do not mistake progress for betrayal." The noble hesitated, his gaze shifting between Alvin and the queen. "The council will not see it that way. They will question your judgment." "Let them," the queen replied, her tone colder now. "My decisions are not theirs to question." The noble bowed again, his movements stiff with resentment, before retreating into the shadows. When he was gone, the queen turned to Alvin. Her expression softened, but the tension in her form remained. "You are not safe here," she said. Alvin frowned. "I thought we had moved past the threats." The council has always been wary of outsiders, she explained. Our bond is unprecedented. They see it as a threat to tradition, to the balance they believe they protect. Then let me speak to them, Alvin said. The queen shook her head. They will not listen. Not yet. But there is another way. The queen led him through a series of corridors that seemed to spiral deeper into the heart of the citadel. The air grew warmer, the light softer, until they reached a vast chamber unlike any he had seen before. The room was circular, its walls covered in flowing patterns of golden energy that moved like rivers. In the center stood a large, crystalline structure, glowing faintly with the same golden light. This is the core, the queen said, her voice quieter now. It is the heart of the citadel and the source of our unity. Through it, I can amplify our bond and show the council what we have created. Alvin approached the core cautiously, its energy resonating through the floor with every step. What happens if they reject it? The queen stepped beside him, her gaze fixed on the glowing structure. Then they will see me as unfit to lead. The bond we share will be used against us. You may be exiled, or worse. Alvin turned to her, his jaw tightening. Why risk it then? She met his gaze, her shifting patterns slowing into something calm and resolute. Because I believe in what we have created, and because I will not let fear dictate my actions any longer. Alvin nodded, his resolve mirroring hers. Then let's do it. The queen placed her hand on the core, and the room filled with light. The golden energy surged, connecting them both to the citadel itself. Alvin felt the bond between them intensify, their shared thoughts and emotions flowing freely. Through the core, the connection spread outward, reaching every part of the citadel. The energy rippled through the walls, carrying their bond to the council and beyond. Alvin felt the resistance, the fear, the doubt, but he also felt curiosity and, in some, hope. The queen's voice resonated through the connection, speaking not in words, but in emotions and images. She shared her memories, her burdens, and the unity she had forged with Alvin. She showed them not just what they had become, but what they could achieve together. The energy pulsed brighter, and Alvin felt the tide begin to shift. The resistance faded, replaced by tentative acceptance. The queen withdrew her hand, and the light dimmed, leaving the chamber in silence. When they returned to the main hall, they found the council waiting. The noble who had confronted Alvin earlier stood among them, his expression unreadable. The eldest member of the council stepped forward, his translucent form glowing faintly. "We have seen what you shared, Sovereign," he said. "And while it challenges everything we know, it is clear that this bond holds promise." The queen inclined her head. "Then you accept it?" The elder hesitated, his light flickering. "We accept that it is worth exploring. But know this, human, the path ahead will not be easy. There are those who will not accept this union, no matter what they have seen." Alvin nodded. Nothing worth doing is ever easy. The elder regarded him for a long moment before stepping back. The council dispersed, leaving the queen and Alvin alone in the hall. "You have done more than I thought possible," the queen said, her voice softer now. Alvin smiled faintly. "So have you." For the first time, the queen allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "This is only the beginning." As they stood together in the quiet hall, Alvin felt the weight of what they had accomplished. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a step forward. And for now, that was enough. The chamber's golden light seemed to pulse in time with Alvin Cross's heartbeat. The core, the pulsating heart of the citadel, glowed steadily, casting radiant patterns on the smooth, reflective walls. The air hummed with an intensity that felt alive, vibrating with the weight of decisions that had led to this moment. Alvin stood beside the queen, their bond an unspoken presence between them. The council had accepted the unity they forged, but it was a fragile truce. The lingering tension among the Claraxian elders and the unspoken doubts of the gathered nobles still hung heavy. Yet in the quiet of this sacred chamber, Alvin felt the possibility of something more, a future not defined by fear, but by trust. The queen stepped forward, her luminous patterns shifting in soft waves that reflected her thoughts. She turned to face him, her expression calm, but her energy charged with something deeper. They see what we have created, but their acceptance is tenuous, she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. To them, this bond is an anomaly, a breach in the traditions that have defined them for centuries. They'll come around, Alvin said, his tone steady. What we've shown them, what we've proven, isn't something they can deny. She studied him for a long moment, her swirling patterns slowing into something almost contemplative. You have more faith in them than I do. Alvin stepped closer, his hand brushing lightly against hers. The contact sent a familiar warmth through him, a resonance that reminded him of their unity, their shared essence. Maybe I'm borrowing some of yours. The queen tilted her head, her luminous form softening in the golden light. You borrow nothing, Alvin Cross. You have become more than you realize. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Alvin searched her face. The ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow, the faint glow that seemed to pulse with her every thought. In that moment, she seemed less like the untouchable sovereign of the Claraxians and more like the woman who had trusted him with her deepest truths. Have I? He asked, his voice quieter now. She stepped closer, the space between them narrowing until he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. You have seen what no other has seen, felt what no other has felt. You are not just human anymore, Alvin. You are us. Her words weren't an accusation or a claim. They were a truth, one he felt in every fiber of his being. The bond they shared had reshaped him, his thoughts, his emotions, even his understanding of himself. He wasn't just an emissary between their species. He was a bridge, a part of something larger than himself. As if sensing his thoughts, the queen raised her hand, her fingers brushing against his cheek. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it carried an intensity that made him still. Do you feel it? She asked, her voice a whisper. I feel everything, he admitted, his chest tightening under the weight of the connection between them. You, me, us. It's all connected, she finished, her gaze locked on his. There is no separation now. Not truly. Her hand lingered on his cheek, her touch igniting something within him. A warmth, a pull, a need that went beyond anything he'd ever experienced. The core pulsed brighter, its golden light intensifying as though it, too, responded to the energy between them. I didn't expect this, Alvin said, his voice trembling with emotion. Any of it. Neither did I, she replied, her voice steady but laced with a vulnerability he had never heard before. But here we are. Her other hand came to rest against his chest, just above his heart. The energy of their bond surged between them, not chaotic or overwhelming as it had been during their earlier trials, but steady and powerful. Alvin covered her hand with his fingers intertwining with hers as the space around them seemed to dissolve. The room melted away into a golden void, the core's light enveloping them. There was no floor, no ceiling, no sense of direction. Only the two of them, suspended in a sea of light. Their bond deepened, the connection between them no longer confined to thoughts or memories. It was something physical, tangible, an unbreakable thread that tied their very essences together. The queen leaned closer, her face mere inches from his. You are no longer an outsider, she said, her breath warm against his skin. You are mine, as I am yours. Alvin's heart raced, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into her, their foreheads touching as the golden light around them pulsed in rhythm with their bond. He felt her emotions flooding through him, her strength, her resolve, her longing, her fear, and she felt his in return. There were no walls, no barriers, no masks, only truth. Her lips brushed against his, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him, not just physical, but something deeper. It wasn't a kiss born of passion, but one of unity, of acceptance, of a connection that defied explanation. When she pulled back, her gaze met his, and he saw something he hadn't expected. Hope. We are stronger together, she said, her voice firm but laced with emotion. Always, Alvin replied. When the golden void receded and the chamber returned, The core pulsed brighter than ever, its energy flowing through the walls and out into the citadel. Alvin felt the shift immediately. The air was lighter, the tension from before dissipating as though the citadel itself had accepted their bond. The queen stepped back, her luminous patterns soft but steady. "The core has recognized us," she said. "Our unity is complete." Alvin nodded, his breath still uneven, but his resolve stronger than ever. "Then it's time we show the galaxy what that means." She smiled faintly, her hand lingering in his for a moment longer before she turned toward the chamber doors. "Yes, it is time." As they walked side by side out of the chamber, Alvin felt the weight of their connection settle into something steady, unshakable. He wasn't just a human diplomat anymore, and she wasn't just a Cleraxian sovereign. Together, they were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. And as the stars outside the citadel shimmered with renewed brilliance, Alvin knew their journey was only beginning.